Welcome to the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. My name is Jin Ong and I'm your host. I practice as an osteopath and psychosomatic therapist and am fascinated by the mind-body connection and how your physical body is a manifestation of your emotional state. I help people get unstuck from their chronic pain and live the life they want, grounded in values and driven by purpose. My aim is to create awareness to the underlying emotions behind pain, injury, and disease in the body. Join me to learn more about the story of your body, what different issues may indicate, how to release emotions so that you can prevent problems, as well as inspiring pain story interviews. Like many of us, Kath Elliott is a woman juggling multiple roles: mother, wife, daughter, sister, business owner, and friend. She's currently based in Melbourne, Australia, and has been in strict lockdown with her family, her husband Paul, and 3 sons due to COVID-19. Kath has always been fit, active, and led a healthy lifestyle, so she was in complete shock when she was diagnosed with locally advanced triple-positive breast cancer at the end of August last year at the age of 46. She discovered the lump herself whilst getting dressed to go to work and instinctually knew straight away that something was not right. Within a week, she'd been through 15 appointments, numerous scans, a procedure to put a port into her arm, and started an intense 6-month program of chemotherapy. Her life as she knew it had been turned completely upside down. But she quickly made a decision to accept her diagnosis with positivity and to see it as a challenge, an opportunity to heal herself physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Although she used conventional medicine for treatment, she embraced and used many other therapies as part of her healing experience. Kath believes that in the years leading up to her diagnosis, she hadn't been deeply connected with or listening to her body and had developed some unhealthy drinking habits that started during her teenage years. A large component of her healing journey focused on getting back in touch with her body, particularly her right breast, where the cancer had developed, as well as understanding and dealing with the emotions and blockages in her body through regular Hahnemann healing and kinesiology sessions. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Each year, close to 20,000 women are diagnosed with breast cancer in Australia, which equates to around 55 women per day. Kath is an ambassador for the Breast Cancer Network Australia's annual Pink Buns fundraising campaign with Baker's Delight, reminding Australians and everyone around the world that a breast cancer diagnosis has a ripple effect extending far beyond those diagnosed. It affects families, friends, workmates, and communities as they support their loved ones through their experience. Kath continues to document her healing experience via Instagram, Healing Breast Cancer, and her website, healingbreastcancer.com.au, with the hope it may help others along the way, particularly those looking for an integrative approach and keeping a positive mindset during diagnosis, treatment, and beyond. Hi, Kathryn. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks, Jen. Really nice to be here. I'm looking forward to having a chat with you.
I'm really pleased that you reached out and wanted to share your story. You've come a long way on your journey. Can you introduce yourself to my listeners?
Sure. So my name's Kath, and I'm now 47, and I'm based in Melbourne, in Victoria. I'm a wife, a mother, a sister, a daughter, a really good friend, and I'm also one of, a woman that was diagnosed with locally advanced breast cancer in August last year. It was a shock diagnosis For me, I've always been a really fit, healthy, kind of active person, watched my diet, done lots of exercise. I've also, I guess, explored sort of the spiritual and emotional sides of my personality as well. So been quite into yoga and meditation. And I guess the morning I found the lump in my breast is a day that I will never forget. It's almost one of those sliding doors moments where you realise that your life path has changed significantly. And I guess 12 months on, it's been 12 months since my diagnosis. It's incredible to look back and process some of what's happened, but also look at how far I've come since then. And I guess one of the things that I'm really looking at now is that you do change so much. So the person that I was before cancer is quite different to the person that I am now, and in many ways, there's been a lot of positive changes.
Yeah. And where are you at with your cancer right now?
So I am in what they would say is remission. I don't have cancer anymore. I went through, so I guess 6 months after I was diagnosed, I found out that the cancer had gone, which was really, really exciting news. I'm still in active treatment though, from a Western medicine point of view, and then I'll be in active treatment and management from a holistic point of view for the rest of my life, because I've learned so much in the last 12 months about there was significant changes that I decided to make to my lifestyle, some that I was already making, but I've decided to kind of progress with those, and also just the perspective and the focus for my life now has changed, and the priorities as well. So, and that's, and I'm still sort of processing all of what those are, but and I do that comes through doing, I do a lot of journaling every day, just as the emotions come up, just to work out, what comes up. Sometimes it's very surprising what comes up as well. Particularly when I was first diagnosed, I noticed a huge amount came up, which was really interesting.
Yeah. Oh, we will definitely get into that, because, as you know, that's what I love, is the emotions behind disease states. And it's great that you can share that insight, because breast cancer is unfortunately very common. You've got some stats on that.
Yeah, well, look, in Australia, in 2020, I think there'll be around 20,000 women that will be diagnosed with breast cancer, and that equates to about 55 women per day. So it is the most common cancer, I think, in women of that sort of age group, 29 to 50, that sort of age range. So, and I guess until it happens to you, you don't really, I didn't have any family history. I'd never had any lumps or felt any lumps in my breasts before. And so, for me, it was a really interesting even shift in thinking, because I think there was this strange sense of false security, thinking I don't have a family history of breast cancer, when really, 90% of people who are diagnosed with breast cancer don't have a genetic link or family history. So even that information for me was really poignant, and something that when I discussed with other people, they didn't know that either. So and also, I guess for me, it was also about being in touch with our own body, and how sometimes in life we get so caught up in our mind and out of our body. And I think I had been out of my body quite a lot in the in the 5 years prior to being, even 10 years prior to being diagnosed with breast cancer, I'd been very focused on exercise in my body in that way, but not in my body from a deeper sense. And so I was really keen to look at all of those emotions when I was going through the initial treatment and healing part of the experience.
Can you take me through what went through your mind? What happened when you first found the lump and all the thought processes that happened from then?
Yeah, sure. It was I look back now and I feel like it was one of those, I had this kind of spiritual download. So it was I was in rush mode. I'd been at the gym, I'd had a shower, I was getting ready for work. I was I just put, I was naked. I just put my undies on, and I ran into into our bedroom, and we just bought this new long sort of flawed mirror that I could see my full body. I ran and I thought, I haven't looked at myself in the mirror for a while. So I thought, okay, well, this is a perfect opportunity. And I looked, and then I looked at my right breast and I thought, that looks a bit strange. And then I looked down and I saw this kind of quite large lump poking through. And I remember the feeling, as soon as I saw that, I just felt it felt like I stopped breathing and my heart skipped a beat, and I just knew. I knew right at that point that something was deeply, going on, and that it was. I knew it was breast cancer straight away, even though I'm not one to. I'm not that type of person who is negative or glass half empty, but I knew. And I called down to my husband. Well, I screamed actually, and he came running up the stairs, and it was almost like it had popped out of nowhere. And I know that it hadn't popped out of nowhere, but it could have been hiding amongst some other dense tissue, and I don't know. It was. And so I booked in to see my GP straight away that day. And I think I'd actually had a breast check at my GP probably within that 12 months, and nothing had come up at that point. So it was less than 12 months later. And, the lump was quite big. It was 6 centimetres, which is a really large lump. It was like a small golf ball, I guess. So I did get onto it straight away, and the emotions that first day, I felt like I was in someone else's life. Like I had a video shoot on for a client, and I remember being there, and all I could think of was this lump, and I'm trying to sort of participate in my other life. But it was almost like I had jet lag, and I just felt like my heart was racing the whole time. And I felt this sense of I don't know what to do now. I'm just trying to let myself catch up with what's happening. And it was great. My GP had booked me in to go into the Melbourne breast unit and have a number of scans the next day. So that's when I went in and started that process. And I didn't share with anyone that day apart from my husband and my parents that I'd found the lump, and my work colleagues as well, and then waited a day or so to share the news, which again was a huge emotional. I think I found that part of the experience extremely difficult because the pain that you feel in terms of having to share news like that with your children and your parents and your brothers and your family and friends is really difficult, because you know that you're going to cause them worry and grief and pain. And for me, that was tough. And I did try to manage that in a way that made it, I guess, easier for me and easier for them. And that was in that I wanted them to be, I guess, be on board with the fact that I wanted to be positive about my healing experience, and that I didn't want cancer to be this frightening, fearful word of death and all of the negative connotations that come with cancer, and that I wasn't approaching it as fighting something. I was looking at it as trying to come to terms with what had happened in my body for the cells to act in this way, and that, you know, I would look at all different areas of my life and see if there were things that I instinctually thought I might be able to change, as well as obviously going through the Western treatment, because the type of breast cancer that I had as well was very driven by hormones and also another protein called HER2. So there's some very there's some targeted treatment that's extremely beneficial for that type of cancer. And so I did choose to have 6 months of chemotherapy. And so I started that straight away, pretty much within less than a week of being diagnosed. And that was a really frightening time for me, because the thought of putting chemo into my body was really, a step that I had to really kind of meditate on. And I did some work with my kinesiologist I guess we did some real work on me accepting chemotherapy from a spiritual level, and looking at trying to make sure that it was really targeting the area it needed to, and that we would look after the other healthy cells, or whatever we want to call them, that we try and keep it away from those in a way. And so we did a lot of visualization on that, and just she had some really good techniques that helped me feel more relaxed with it. And also, after I'd had each chemotherapy session, I would go and see my kinesiologist, and we'd do another session just to sort of make me feel more at ease with the process, which really worked, actually.
Great. And with your cancer, what sort of cancer was it? Just because there are so many different types out there, and I know that other women who have these different types of cancer, they do get inspired by connecting with people who have the same type and seeing where they've come from and where they are now. So
sure. Mine was called triple positive breast cancer, and it was locally advanced, which basically means that I had a large tumour that was in my right breast. It was just one large tumour in my right breast that was the growth was driven by both hormones, estrogen and progesterone, and the HER2 protein. So triple positive, I guess, isn't a really common form of breast cancer. It's there's triple positive, there's triple negative, and then there's also hormone induced cancers. And mine obviously had all three markers when they did the pathology testing. And so it's an aggressive type of cancer. That was the other thing that I found out. So I didn't have any lymph involvement or any involvement anywhere else in my body. So I had to go through a number of different scans initially. So from that perspective, I guess I was, even in the first 2 weeks, I had that absolute feeling of relief when I was told that it hadn't spread anywhere else, and that I was dealing with locally advanced breast cancer, which hadn't gone into other areas. So that for me was the first time even in those first 2 weeks, where I actually felt a lot of joy. And I remember when I got the news from my oncologist, I literally just, the tears streaming down my face, just, I was so relieved. And it was really, it was really good news for me. And triple positive breast cancer, that's the type that I have. And even before I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I didn't even realise that there were all these different types. And often the type of breast cancer that you have, it will, the type of treatment that you have will be tailored to that breast cancer. So so if you have triple positive breast cancer like I do, your treatment often lasts for longer than it does for certain other cancers, because I'm having some targeted treatment still for 12 months, a drug called Herceptin. So,
And what other procedures did you have to treat?
So I had 6 months of chemotherapy, and what happened after chemo was that I had a scan, and the lump had pretty much dissolved. There was no cancer left from that perspective. And then after that, I had a 4-week break and decided that I would have a lumpectomy or surgery, which basically removed the area where the tumour was, so they could do some pathology testing on that to see if there were any cancer cells there, or if there were clear margins. That's kind of the terminology that they use. So I had that surgery, and the results came back, and I had clear margins, no evidence. They kind of call it a complete pathological response. So there was nothing there, which again was amazing news. I remember going into the surgeon's office, and I hadn't been given the news. He thought I already had, but I was there with my parents and my husband, and he said, "Oh, you must be overjoyed." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, and he gave me the news, and I literally, even thinking about it now, that moment for me was so key, because when you're diagnosed with cancer, for me, I had focused on that day when I get the news that it wasn't there anymore. So when he told me that, it was a beautiful summer day in Melbourne, and I remember coming out of his rooms and standing there, and I just had the sun on my face, and I closed my eyes, and I thought, I remember I could just feel the sun going into my body and into my cells, and I just thought, I'm going to remember this moment for the rest of my life. And I come back to that moment because that was a pure moment of just joy and relief, and also just complete, there was also this deep sense of connection with myself as well, because I felt that the relationship with myself over that period of time had been so strong and so deep. There was just this real connection with my soul to say, this feels, really wonderful. You've got to remember this. So I had surgery, and then I had, I guess, 4 or 5, 6 weeks after surgery, I then had radiation therapy for 4 weeks. So that was 20 rounds. Yeah. And then that finished, and now I'm still, I've got 3 more treatments of targeted therapy, which isn't chemo. It's a drug that I have called Herceptin that targets the HER2 side of breast cancer that I have, and I'll be finished that in November.
Great.
Yeah, and then active treatment will be done.
Yes, that's amazing. So good that you managed to get through all of that. What was your experience having chemo, radiation, and the Herceptin treatment, which you're still doing? How did your body respond? How did you cope mentally and emotionally?
Look, I think I coped incredibly well. Even when I had breast cancer, I never saw myself, I didn't like to term myself as being sick or unhealthy. I still still had this visualization of myself as a really healthy woman who had breast cancer, and how could I support myself in the best way possible to, I guess, be in a positive frame of mind to deal with chemotherapy and all the treatment and all the emotional sides of communicating with people. How could I best get myself into, I guess, strong positions physically, emotionally, spiritually? So I spent a lot of time on, I did a lot of research into sort of exercise and diet and how they could, and supplements, and how they could support me during chemotherapy. I found a wonderful oncology naturopath here in Melbourne who put together really tailored plans for every step of the way to support me through the different treatment, and that was really gave me a lot of peace of mind, I guess. And
I often recommend oncology naturopaths. I don't think people know they exist, and they can really help you navigate the alternatives and make sure that any supplements and diet that you do take and utilize is actually safe to do during your treatment, because there can be so many ups and downs when you have your chemo session and you have that recovery or the radiation, and it can sometimes be hard to keep up with your supplements as well.
Definitely. And some supplements you aren't, you're not supposed to take when you're having certain chemotherapy. So you do need to work with someone that really knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
So that the lady that I saw was this wonderful woman called Tanya Wells, who's part of the Melbourne Integrative Oncology Group in Melbourne. And she's, I think she's probably the expert in her field here, and she's amazing. And I found she puts together like a huge report for each part of the process, and then a list of all the different supplements and what they're doing and why they're helping you and when you take them. So that for me, was very helpful and a really integral part of my experience. And I also made sure that I showed what she put together to my oncologist to make sure that she felt okay with the various supplements. And she was always, she said, they know what they're doing, and this is fantastic. And if you want to do this, I'm so happy for you to do it.
Yeah, it is so important that your team, the conventional and alternative, do communicate, and especially with the alternative, that you have someone confident enough to speak to the conventional medical practitioners to justify why they're choosing the different natural supplements.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, so I was taking, sort of lots of different supplements, from green tea to turmeric to fish oil, vitamin E, vitamin D. Then there were other different supplements to help with kind of cell turnover when I was going through radiation. I had this special skin plan that I used during radiation. It was, a green tea spray that I made up. And then, a couple of other different creams. And so I found that I didn't have any radiation dermatitis at all. Okay. So it was really important to have that support through treatment, because look, chemotherapy, and I had an intensive chemotherapy, I guess, regime, in that I had 16 rounds of chemotherapy over 5 months. I had 4, really strong. It's called the Red Devil in chemo land, and it's pretty awful. It looks pretty awful, and I had that every 3 weeks. I had 4 rounds of that. That's called AC chemo, and look, I felt pretty okay on it, but it's not until you stop chemo that you realise that it has actually really sucked the living daylights out of you, I guess. Even though I wasn't feeling nauseous or too unwell, I lost quite a lot of weight when I was going through chemo. And I guess it was also because my diet was really clean as well. And I did some intermittent fasting as well when I was doing chemo.
Yeah.
So just, and there's some evidence around it, around that now, and I decided that it was something that I would try. This was also came through my naturopath as well. So, but look, I slept really well. I exercised quite a lot during chemo as well. So I would exercise on the day that I had chemo, the morning beforehand. I would make sure I would go out and do some quite strong cardio exercise to get my endorphins going and the oxygen in my blood. And then I would also do another cardio the day afterwards, even if I was feeling tired, because again, just pushing it through my system and detoxifying as well.
Yeah.
So I found that worked really well. And that's another thing that is just starting to come through here, even through, Western sort of medicine, is exercise is a really important part of the program.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, people have been told to rest and not exercise, and if you're not feeling well, don't, just lie down and don't do anything.
Yeah.
And even though some people are obviously too unwell to sometimes exercise, even just getting up to go out into the fresh air and have a walk is a really important part of the process. And even some of the studies that they're doing here in Melbourne at the moment are showing that daily exercise is so important to treatment and recovery and how you feel.
Yeah.
So that, again, for me was a really important daily activity that I put a focus on, whether it be, cardio, walking, doing some weights, yoga, whatever it was. There was always something that I tried to build into the day.
Yeah, right.
From that perspective, yeah.
So what other therapies did you do alongside kinesiology and oncology naturopathy with your treatment?
Yeah, so I did quite a lot of emotional healing work, energy healing. So I was very lucky. A good friend of mine is a Hanuman healer, and she would come each week or every 2 weeks and work on emotional points and releasing emotions from those points. So we would talk about it beforehand, or sometimes she would say, I can feel whatever emotion was sitting at the top, and then we'd work on those points. So some of the emotions that we looked at were, the shock. So working on dealing with that and releasing that from my body. Disappointment, which was more underlying disappointment in relationships, from previous relationships or things that had happened in relationships in my life. So that came up.
Because I often find that, the breast and chest stuff is about resentment, especially from past relationships, be it family or partners. Are you able to talk about that a bit more?
Yeah, sure. So, resentment and disappointment in relationships was a big one for me, because I guess I'm married, but my husband and I had been through an emotionally really up and down journey over the 10 years prior to me being diagnosed. We'd hit some really difficult times financially, and that had caused in our relationship a lot of, I guess, resentment from me and anger. And I had felt, I think, and the way that I dealt with a lot of that had been, I'd suppressed a lot of emotion, or thought I can deal with this on my own. I'm a strong person. I'll just suppress it. I'll get through this. But often I would feel it bubbling up. And look, I've always been someone who does have quite a short temper. I'll get angry, but then I will very quickly move on. That's just me. I'm a bit fiery, but and I've been like that since I was born. Basically, that's who I am.
Yeah.
And
In your nature.
It's in my nature, exactly. Well, I think it's in Ayurvedic terms, it's pitta, isn't it? Yeah. Is that, yeah, well, that's me. I'm almost like, I think I'm 90% pitta. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's me. So there was, and the other thing in the disappointment was I had, in a way, kind of been punishing myself. So not through being mean to myself in that I'd say, oh, you're ugly or you're horrible, but just in really disciplined. You must get up and do exercise at 5 a.m. in the morning, and you need to do this and this and this and this. So I'd had this inner dialogue going on for a long period of time that had been, I think, really I think I'd just been pretty cruel to myself from that perspective. And I also, there was just this underlying relationship issue with my husband that had gone on. We'd had some, really good times over that period, but there was we had some struggles, and it had been hard for me to deal with. And I'd also had some shame as well. So I had often decided that I wouldn't talk about certain things that had happened because I'd felt ashamed of it. So part of my experience was to start releasing these emotions and start talking about things that had happened, and to show up as my authentic, vulnerable self. And that ended up being the greatest gift that I've ever been given. I mean, not that I'm not an open, vulnerable person, but there are so many different levels of how we can show up for ourselves and to others. And you can choose whether to release, 20% or 80% or 100, whatever is. And sometimes you don't even know what that additional percent is. And so for me, it ended up, I had to address many different relationships and areas in my life to say, look, this is actually what happened. This is how I'm feeling. This is what we've been going through. And even in past relationships, I also, all this stuff started coming up from past relationships, even, with my first sort of true love. And that, I wrote him a letter, and, I never heard anything back, but it was about what I needed to release. And so it was, and that it wasn't about, I still love you or anything like that, but it was more about thank you for our relationship and what it gave me in my life. Because I think I was looking at, I had this, I guess, mortality came to visit me. I was like, I have to look mortality in the eye here, because it's never come to me before, and I don't know what's going to happen here with this experience with cancer. I really don't know. And what has my life meant? What do I mean to people? Did I mean something to this person, or what have I been here doing all this time? And if I do continue living, what do I want my life to mean, and what do I want it to stand for, and what's really important in relationships? And so all of these questions started really, I guess, marinating in my mind and my body, and it I was overwhelmed actually with all of this kind of stuff that was coming up for me. And I started going through old photos, old letters, old school diaries, and it was just and it then made me realize, gosh, there's just such a history of things and memories that we don't often even unpack, and we just, we're on the surface of and look, I'm very much, it is wonderful to be in the present, of course, but it was also, I found it very cathartic to go back and look at some of those areas. And, what it made me realize was, what a rich, incredible life I had, and that I had so many relationships in my life that I'd had for a long period of time, and that they were able to sustain me and give me so much love at a time when I really needed it. And that, again, is, you can't underestimate the power of, the connection of people in your life and what that love can do for you when you're going through illness, disease, healing.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to ask for it. Sometimes it just is provided to you, but you also have to open the channel up for that. So I opened up channels to say, I want you to be with me during this experience. I don't want to shut you out. I need your love. I need your support. And that's why I sort of opened up my own Instagram account, I guess, to document the journey, the experience with breast cancer too, because I wanted to be able to share that, and I wanted people to be able to, look at it and not have to feel they needed to text me or contact me, but there was an opportunity to see what I was going through. And it was also really cathartic for me too, to be able to, I even look back now and hop on some of the posts and go, oh my gosh, that, you forget sometimes what you've been through and what you're experiencing on a certain day. There's one post that, when I'd first started losing my hair and came out in chunks, and just, I did a post, and I remember I was coming down the lift from work and I went like that, and I just remember that feeling in my heart of, oh my God, people tell you it's going to happen, but until it does, and just the grief that came up for me was immense. It was immense. And even though I didn't lose all my hair because I wore the cold cap, as a woman, it's still very confronting, just your hair starting to fall out. And, I lost all my eyebrows and eyelashes and just all those things that make you feel a bit, I guess, feminine. That's another part of the experience that you go through, as well as, that's a result of the treatment too.
An identity change on so many levels.
Yeah.
And just to point out, the words that you're using just resonate with the area that was affected. So through your chest, which is the heart chakra, which governs emotions around love, connection, nurturing and nourishment, and then the more negative or normal emotions of resentment and hate from past relationships. And which side was it on?
Right.
Yeah, and so that has to do with masculine or males in your life, but also your masculine energy in yourself. So in a minute, we'll go back into your history, because you've just said that you're a pitter person. For anyone who doesn't know, pitters are the ones that can just really drive hard, overcommit, do lots of things, and usually are at risk of burning themselves out. So when was it the Hahnemann practitioner who opened your eyes to the emotional stuff, or were you already familiar with this?
No, I was already familiar with it, and I had been doing some energy healing and kinesiology work, definitely. And I had been practicing, I'd done a Vedic meditation course. So I was, I guess, quite spiritually aware and delving into those areas. I also belonged to a women's circle as well, where we would do all sorts of kind of practices as well. And we also did this incredible healing practice for me when I was going through cancer. It's called the Power of Eight. So it was all about, I was in the center of the circle, and just this, intention of giving someone all this beautiful, positive, healing energy, which was amazing as well. So I often asked people to send me, positive healing energy. It was really, I felt that was a really important part of the experience for me. Some people think all of that stuff's just like whatever, but no, for me, it really wasn't. But, and I think it's really interesting I think I have been surrounded by a lot of masculine energy in my life. Like, I have 3 brothers, I have three sons. I've always been really connected to male friends and men, but on the other side of things, I'm a Libran as well. I have so many female friends, like from all walks of life. Like my husband was even laughing with me this morning because in Melbourne, in lockdown, about one of the only things you can do is go for a walk. And he just laughs at me. He goes, "Oh, so who are you off for a walk?" Like he just said, there are so many women that I never knew you even had in your life, and every day you're with someone else. And so I've always had so many, beautiful female friends as well. But the masculine in me, I think, had really dictated a lot. And I've noticed that I've become a lot more soft and gentle with myself. And even with sleeping and letting myself rest when I need to, listening to my body, being much more kind to my body as well. And that's been a practice I've really had to focus on, because I had got into this mentality of, you must get up and do this exercise because it's going to keep you healthy. And I was exhausted. I mean, the lead up to being diagnosed with breast cancer, I was really tired. And I remember looking at because I used to wear a heart rate monitor, and I could see things. My body was struggling and I was exhausted. I was getting up before, I was 4:30 in the morning to go to this gym class at 5 o'clock in the morning, 5 days a week. It was kind of relentless sort of stuff. I will never, ever do that again.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I did it as well. Like it seems so ludicrous now. I don't get up. I still get up early, but I meditate now, and then I'll go for a beautiful walk. And we can't go to the gym here anyway. But if I do go to the gym, I'd probably go maybe 2 or 3 times a week now. It wouldn't be that kind of, just the way that I was doing it beforehand.
And what about your work? What was that like? What sort of work were you in? And
so I was working in PR and marketing, and I'd been working in that for probably 20 years. I'd had my own PR business, and then I'd been working for a really good friend of mine for about 10 years. And we were, we're super close friends. But again, it was an area in my life that I wasn't necessarily passionate about anymore. And I didn't really want to be working in kind of corporate PR, but I'd sort of stayed working in that area. And so I have resigned from that job now, and I'm looking. I've started my own company and business, and I'm going to go into something completely different, which will be driven by my experience with breast cancer. So even that has been so joyous, because I feel like I'm much more on purpose, living the way that I want to and choose to. And it feels, every day now feels like a day I'm so grateful to have. And just also, I'm so much more present in my life. And I know we use this word gratitude and presence, but I really mean it. Like, I feel life slowed down, and the magic that I find in absolutely normal moments now, just I'm often in tears every day, because something will happen and it will just touch me so much. Never used to happen. And I love that now, because I have an appreciation for what living is, and the fact that, it can be taken away from us. And sometimes we don't realize how important just a normal day in our life is. And I do now, and I make sure I focus on that every day. I spend 5 minutes just going, today, just think about how important just the gift of today is. And that for me is really, beautiful.
And I think this is why I love to have people share these stories, so that people don't have to get that sickness or illness or injury that makes them reflect. When often we're faced by death, either ourselves or through loved ones or friends, it makes us rethink what we're doing with our life. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that you mentioned earlier, the social media aspect, because I know some people, when they are going through their illness, they get a lot of criticism from people, like, why are you being on social media? You should be focusing on your healing. But quite often there are so many hours in the day, and yes, you are focusing on your healing, but also understanding that sharing on social media is a source of inspiration for other people and connection, but also it is cathartic in itself, sharing and showing up and expressing yourself.
Yeah, look, I think it's such a personal decision. And I guess from my perspective, I found it so important when others were sharing their stories. I found it was such a privilege to listen to what other people's experiences were, and part of, I guess, my self-expression, and I wanted to share my experience, but it is such a personal choice. For some people, it's just too public. They like to keep what they're going through to themselves, which is completely, I think, absolutely a personal decision, and something that I really respect. And I don't think, and I think that's one of the things I've learned through this experience is we're all in control of our own experience with illness and disease, and the way I chose to manage it is just the way that I've chosen to manage it, and not the way that everyone does. And what I found, but it's also really important, I think, for us to share our stories if we want to, because for me, I learned so much through people sharing their stories, and I did a lot of reading on people who'd been through all sorts of different cancers and what they found was beneficial for them. Because I think, as with anyone's stories, you take out little nuggets that you think will fit in your life. And that for me was important. I used to always, if I was listening to podcasts or reading books, or even with women that I'd been, connected with who'd gone through the experience of breast cancer, they all left me with something that I took and could integrate into my own experience. But it didn't necessarily mean that I was going to, have a carbon copy of what they'd gone through. Yeah. So I think we've always got to remember that we are so unique as human beings. Our DNA, our cells, who we are as this, spiritual being. Yeah. That what I go through is not what someone else is going to go through. But it's also it's interesting to hear people's different approaches to their experience as well.
It is. Because, as you say, like with the alternatives, there's so much out there, and it's probably more around the people who are commenting and trying to tell people that they don't know what to focus on, is just coming from a place of understanding that actually this is the way that they want to heal. And sometimes it is really hard to put yourself out there, and so just be mindful before you go and tell someone how they should be doing something, the impact that it can have on them.
Yes, exactly. And look, I was also a little bit worried that because I had that more holistic approach, even I wrote a letter to my breast cancer that was very much about acceptance, and that I spent a lot of time getting in touch with my breast and massaging it every day and talking to it. And I spoke about that, but I had that sort of feeling of like, oh gosh, I wonder if people think I'm a bit loopy or whatever. And I thought, look, it doesn't matter because that's what's worked for me. And it's not going to resonate with some people. Some people are going to go, oh, what? Why would you do that? It's cancer. How could you do that? But for me, it was the acceptance was the greatest part early on, to accept what was happening and to not feel like something had happened to me it was all more about, okay, these things happen. How am I going to approach it? It's now about my reaction and what happens from here. Yeah. That's what I have control over. And that's with anything in life. It's not just it's not with not just cancer, not just different disease. That's really what in life, what's the most important thing is that we always have control over the way we approach something. So I never felt out of control in my experience with with breast cancer, I always felt that I had choices,
Yeah.
and I made sure that I looked at where those choices were. And I think that's the other thing that I often try and, I guess, communicate, is that we can still have quite a lot of control in a good way in these
Yeah.
experiences. And there are always things you can look at to help support you as well. And some of that is often through talking to other people who've been through a similar experience, if they're prepared to share
Yeah.
with you.
Have a copy of that article, The Letter to Your Breast Cancer, on your website? Because I'd love
I
to.
do.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll make sure I pop that link in there, because again, it's just this source of inspiration. I know that I share my birth plan with friends who ask me, because my birth plan was very blunt and very direct. So I think it's just good to pull on ideas, because some people go, oh, I didn't know I could write that, or I didn't know I could ask that. So yeah, that would be great to put in there. And were you working throughout your treatment, or did you pull back?
I worked through part of my chemo treatment. So I worked until November. So that was 2 months of chemo. And I decided that I didn't want to continue working through the second half of chemo, not because I didn't feel well enough to, but more because my emotional mentality was that I wanted to focus and put as much time into releasing the emotions, focusing on positive emotions, doing things that really made me feel happy and nurtured, connecting with friends as much as possible. I wanted to build that into my day rather than working.
Yeah.
So that's why I decided. And I also had, the luxury that I didn't have to work for a while. So that's what I did. And I think it was a really important part of the process for me. Even though my work were very supportive, I didn't want to be going in. That's not how I wanted to be spending the time when I wasn't going through treatment. And so again, it's a personal decision.
Yeah. Did you go back to work, or because of that, did you decide to finish?
No, I took a leave of absence, and then in June of this year, I decided I wouldn't go back to my job, my PR job, and that I would start up another business. So I'm starting up. Well, I've started up another company, and I'm in
What
sort
is
of
it?
the creative phase at the moment. Well, it's called the company is called My Breast Friend, and I am looking at developing some products that will support and educate women about kind of breast cancer and self-checking and that kind of thing. So I'm just in the very beginnings of it, but yeah, it's really exciting, and I feel very passionate about it. There'll be I'm going to support the Breast Cancer Network in Australia, hopefully with some sales going to them. I'm really passionate about research as well. So that's what I've been working on the last few months. So it's exciting. Yeah.
It's good, using your feminine energy to create.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I found all good ideas come when I'm in the shower, I often find. So if I'm having a bit of a mental block, it's amazing. Water flow is really good for my creative energy. It just sort of comes up. And I also did this incredible course during lockdown about, tapping into your creative genius and your intuition. So I've been doing a lot more work on getting in touch with my intuition, with making decisions about things as well, rather than the ego and the mind that often leads us back to what we know and not, other stuff. So that's I spend a bit of time each day on tapping. I've made these choices in my life in different areas, and then I consciously focus on those and make and I'll take some form of action each day on those. So that's been really fantastic as well.
Oh, brilliant. And how has things in your life changed? Have you had to let go of stuff, and have you had to let go of people? Have your relationships changed in your life?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Huge changes, and I guess all for, even though they've been up and down and challenging along the way, everything is kind of in a really, I guess, interesting place 12 months on. Yeah, my husband and I, whilst I was going through breast cancer, we went through a really up and down time. He was supportive in some ways, in other ways he wasn't supportive. He had a lot of his own sort of mental health and his own issues going on that kind of, I guess, came up hugely when I was going through cancer, because I think for him it was also like, oh my gosh, Kath's, this, it was kind of like we both started going on a bit of a journey, and in a way it forced us to deal with things.
Yeah.
So he started having counselling, I had counselling, we both had counselling. And, interestingly, as I sit here right now, our relationship has never been in a better place than it is now, because we have had to address a whole lot of stuff that had been sitting under the surface. And it's forced both of us to heal in different ways, and I guess be more open, more vulnerable. And it's actually, it's like we're in a different relationship now than we were a year ago. It's like a different, he's like a different person, I'm a different person. But I also realised that, life is short. If a relationship isn't going to go into the next phase, that's okay. Whereas in the past I would have been really frightened about, or thought, it's failure if a marriage ends, or, we've got 3 kids together. But I guess I thought to myself, no, you know what, if this isn't the right relationship moving into the next phase of my life, that's okay. I can get through anything, and we can still, and I think we both really looked at that, and we did a lot of work on it, and we've both made the choice that we feel that now that it is, because we've done so much work on the areas that we needed to.
Yeah.
Not to say that you still don't have your challenging days and times, you do in any relationship, but sometimes a lot of couples aren't prepared to look at the dark and the hard and the difficult
until
sometimes it's easier to walk, and sometimes it's easier to walk away, right? Some people don't want to do the work.
I know so many people do just walk away from those relationships, and then they just repeat it in future relationships. And perhaps the cancer was the thing that made you guys look at that. But often people stay in a state of discomfort in their relationship for far too long and hold on to it, but then also hold themselves back because they are scared of the judgment, the society, and what others are going to think about them. But actually, if you go into that uncomfortable stuff and talk about what you don't really want to, you could actually grow and flourish and have a much more satisfying relationship.
Yes, I think so. I think what I realised is that sometimes we are often all living on the surface with various different masks on, and that I guess I decided to take a lot of those off. And so I live my life a lot more authentically and say things now that, and look, I've always been one to speak my mind, but I feel like if we're really vulnerable and we speak about, the shadow side of ourselves and everything else that's going on, that actually gives other people permission to do the same thing. And the connection that forms when that happens is it is so deep and so magical, because it's in those darkest, most challenging times that we really do connect. It's not in the happy-go-lucky times. It's when people share those sides of themselves. And if you can do that in an intimate relationship as well, it is super important, because often you can try and, I guess, just exist alongside and not do that work. So we delved in, we did that work. It was so hard at times, and even whilst I was going through cancer, I was also doing this deep emotional work in my marriage and relationship as well. And the other thing that happens sometimes with cancer is there are friends who you rely on, who you expect will be there for you. And look, I was so lucky. I had incredible friendships and so many beautiful people that did amazing things for me. But there were a few people who I was really, I guess, disappointed that they weren't there for me, and they didn't really even acknowledge what was going on for me or in my life, or just were absent, I guess, just a real absence of feeling, or I just didn't feel that they were there.
What would you say to those people? Because I think some people get really awkward and they just don't know what to do. So what advice would you give to those people who maybe find themselves in this situation where they so want to be there for their friend, or maybe they don't because they've got their own stuff going on? But what would your advice be?
Yeah, look, my advice, and it's only my personal advice, is that when someone's going through something big, whether it's, illness, personal crisis, death in the family, divorce, whatever it is, it's really important to acknowledge it. And it doesn't have to be a huge conversation. For me, it was just really nice if I got sent a card or a message or something, just acknowledging. And it doesn't have to be dropping meals at someone's place. It doesn't have to be huge amounts of attention. I had people who would just send me a message every week or two just to check in. How are you going? How are you feeling? That was beautiful because they were thinking about me, or sending you so much love today. I know you've got chemo on Thursdays. Beautiful. That's just thoughtful, but it doesn't take a lot to do that. And even I had people who drop around, just some snacks for their kids. I had some gorgeous friends who made me beautiful music to listen to, for chemo. And I had, other friends who had a beautiful brunch for me, just sent organic food to me. There were so many different ways, magazines, books, whatever it was. There are so many different ways you can be there for someone. And often I think, put yourself in that person's shoes. What would you like? And then go from there. And often it might just be something really small that you can do.
Yeah.
But I think if you don't acknowledge, or you actually are too scared to say anything, that person feels that. And I felt that. I felt like some people were avoiding me or didn't want to come up to me in the schoolyard or whatever because it was too difficult to address the conversation. And I think you have to think to yourself, imagine what it's like for the person who actually has cancer. They have to have these conversations every single day. And I didn't mind having those conversations, but I think that's the main thing that's actually going on for you in your life at that point in time. So if someone's not prepared to acknowledge it, it actually doesn't feel great.
Yeah.
I used to love it when someone would come up to me and say, I'm so sorry to hear about your diagnosis. How are you feeling? That's all you have to say. You don't have to make it better. You can't change it. It's just, a simple acknowledgement, which I think means the world, really.
Yeah. So you've got a few months left of the Herceptin treatment, and you talked about your lifelong self-care routine, and that's probably going to evolve, but what does it look like now?
Yeah, so right now, and lockdown's been great in Melbourne for this because I've got more time and I'm slow. I've slowed down a lot. So I start off every morning. I meditate for 20 minutes, and that is just the best start to my day because it's often when things will filter up. And I'll journal for
Vedic meditation.
I do the Vedic meditation. Yes, I have a mantra, but yeah, and even that, it's not sort of going on. I don't say the mantra. The mantra is just there as this beautiful grounding tool. So the thoughts come up, and if you kind of feel a bit caught in them, you just come back to your mantra, and it grounds you back down, which is really I love Vedic meditation because you don't need anyone to guide you. It is all about your own, it's all about what's going on in your own mind. And I find it really, really relaxing.
Mm-hmm.
And also incredibly healing, actually. Yeah, very healing. And so I do a little bit of journaling after that for 10 minutes, just if anything's really come up for me. And then sometimes I'm into sort of angel cards and oracle cards. So I'll do that each day, and then I'll go for a walk with my husband and our dog out in nature. Beautiful, love it. We do that for an hour. And then my diet is still, I went plant-based pretty much whilst I was going through treatment. I've relaxed a bit more on my diet now. That was again an instinctual thing, that I didn't want to create too much discipline around things for myself. So it's more the 80-20 for me now. Like I'll have, I had 5 or 6 years where I'd never ate sort of a piece of chocolate or ate bread or anything like that. I don't do that anymore. I allow myself just a bit more leeway in life to enjoy those things. But I guess one of the main things that I have completely taken out of my life is alcohol. I realised that I'd had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol over the years. I had, I guess what I would say was a binge drinking issue. I could easily not drink for a long period of time, but when I did drink, it would sometimes get out of control. And I feel like that was one of the unhealthy behaviours that I'd had in my life from growing up as a teenager in Australia. It was funny, before I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I decided to stop drinking in July and just have some time off. I think my body knew that it was about to go into some sort of healing / whatever was going on, and I never went back to drinking, and I still haven't. So I'm 15 months on, and I see and I did a lot of work on kind of why I drank and the reasons for drinking, and it wasn't so much an emotional, I guess. There weren't emotional reasons so much behind drinking, but it was just this behaviour that had been so ingrained that I had to look at it. And then once I actually stopped the habitual sort of triggers, I realised life was so great without it. And because I'm a social person, I love being out. I can still go out and feel completely comfortable. So that's been a big change, though. And another area that I had to do a lot of work in. And I still have regular energy healing. I still have an appointment with my kinesiologist at least monthly. Melbourne lockdowns made that a little bit trickier. Yoga is still a really important part of my program as well. And I still take ongoing supplements as well, so which I will take, I think, forever. So I still see my naturopath every 3 months. We look at kind of my bloods and my hormone levels and my stress levels as well, just to see what's happening, which is really important now. And I've just started doing some work on embodiment and sexuality. So I'm starting to look at that area of my life as well, because there's so much power and that we don't access as women. And so I'm now trying to do more work in that area as well, because I think a lot of us are very repressed and we don't even know it, and that there's so much we can connect into. So that's the next area that I'm looking at, as well as an area of self-expression, is in female sensuality, sexuality, our bodies, being more connected into our bodies.
Yeah, great. Now, something that comes up for me is you were in a position where you didn't have to work. And a lot of people, when they hear about all the alternative stuff, it's not funded. So what would you say to the people who perhaps, they don't even want to put it out there, they don't want to ask for fundraising, and they don't have the money to maybe invest in themselves in this way, to even go and do a yoga class and all that sort of stuff. What would your suggestion be to those people?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there are still things that you can do that don't cost any money. And I think the things that I would really recommend are, you can still focus on, I guess, looking at what you do have in your life and what you are grateful for. And I mean that from the perspective of, you can change your focus of thinking. It requires a certain, I guess, it's just a shift in perspective, and we can all do that. It doesn't matter who we are, and it doesn't cost any money to do it. And there's a lot of, I think, and I still do this each day. You know, what is something today that worked out really well for me, and just write down 3 things. And I find that that's really powerful. It's not about necessarily sometimes what I'm grateful for, but what happened today, or and even writing that down just gives you a focus. The other thing that I think is really important is breathing and the art of the breath. So even if you haven't done yoga and you haven't done a breath work course, I often find just coming back and doing some deep breathing, coming back into my heart, it's really important. It grounds you, and it's also really healing. So breathing is a really important tool that we have that we often forget about.
Yeah.
And the other one is, if you can get out into a park and be out in nature or the beach or wherever you are, going for a walk is a really an easy way of just getting out and connecting. And I think even just walking and talking with someone as well is just a beautiful way to, I find there's a difference between sitting opposite someone and having a conversation, but then when you're walking with them, it's a really beautiful way to connect, and often provide space for people to share without feeling like they're being looked at too much.
Yeah.
It's often fun with, so those are the things that I would recommend. I mean, I think it's really difficult, and that's one area that I'm really keen to focus on here in Australia. Is it's so disappointing that naturopathy isn't funded here, and that we don't even have options to have funded sort of exercise or yoga or any of those sorts of things for people that are going through illness. It baffles me. It really does. I don't understand it. I find it very frustrating, and it's an area that I'm going to campaign on here.
Are there things in Australia, though, where people can reach out and maybe Breast Cancer Australia funds? Like, I know in our town there's a program called Can Live, and I don't think a lot of the locals know about it. So if you are in Wanaka or Queenstown, I believe there's a lot of fundraising that goes on there, and you can, if you're a local, you can apply to go and do the Gawler Institute retreat. In Gawler comes over. And I think sometimes, I have a friend in Melbourne, I don't know if they're still doing it, so I'm not going to mention the clinic, but they were offering free Pilates to anyone who had experienced cancer.
Yes. Yeah, and I think there are some options like that. And the Breast Cancer Network of Australia is the main consumer body in Australia that represents women and men who have breast cancer, and they do have lots of webinars and forums and some free exercise classes and yoga classes and all those sorts of things that are available. And there's also another organisation in Victoria called Counterpart as well, and they also offer counselling services and those types of things as well. Right. So look, there are those sorts of services that are offered, but you do often have to delve them out for yourself and ask questions and find out where they are. So but there are definitely things around.
Great. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Well, no, I think my main message would be for anyone going through, and it's not only breast cancer, but anyone going through an illness, to always remember that you are not like anyone else, and that there's always this, I guess, for me, it was always this hope and this opportunity that I'm unique, in the way that I focus on something and the way my body will deal with something is really different to anyone else, and that there is a huge, I guess, your own self belief is so important. And I'm not saying not saying that it cures anything, but I'm saying self belief in your own body's ability to heal is really important as well, and to focus on that as well, because our bodies are pretty amazing, and often there's so much stuff going on that we don't even realize. It's a continual journey to focus on. And I guess the other thing is that once you've been through an experience like breast cancer or any type of disease, often people want you to move on, and they're like, oh, that's over. And for me, I don't see it that way. I see it as an experience that's now integrated into my DNA, and it's changed me forever. And I'm, in a way, really, I guess, it's changed who I am. And so I don't want to forget about it. It's not something to forget about. It's something for me to talk about, and to continue to share my experience, and to help others who've been through, who may go through breast cancer and other experiences. So, and I think that there's never, I guess, I think Western medicine is really important, but there is always an opportunity to look at other therapies in any healing disease journey, and that it's great to be open to those. And for me, I found that really was incredible to have both of those sort of sitting alongside during this experience for me.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. I've really enjoyed our chat.
Thanks for sharing. Thanks for tuning in to today's Pain Story interview on the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. Anything shared during this episode is for information only. It does not replace professional advice from a healthcare practitioner. If you are experiencing pain, injury, or illness, seek advice that is catered to your individual needs.